The trigger, a universe in peril. The universe had always been a place of chaos. The endless expanse of stars, planets, and unknown dangers had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. Wars were fought, empires were built and destroyed, and species, some more advanced than others, vied for control over vast stretches of space. For as long as anyone could remember, the galaxy had been a battlefield. But there was one thing that had always remained constant: humanity's quiet existence. For years, Earth had watched from the sidelines, its people unaware of the true dangers lurking beyond their home planet. Humans had been content in their isolation, focused on their own growth, their own progress. They had never expected to play a significant role in the grand scheme of the galaxy. They weren't the strongest, the smartest, or the most advanced. They were just humans. But everything changed when the message came. It was a signal from the farthest reaches of space, transmitted to Earth in the form of a distress call. The message was weak, crackling with interference, but it was clear enough for the humans to hear the desperation in the words. A race of aliens, known as the Kryalzar, had arrived in the galaxy. They were ancient, powerful, and ruthless. The Kryalzar had conquered countless worlds, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. And now, they were on their way to Earth. The Kryalzar were unlike any species humans had ever encountered. They didn't negotiate. They didn't reason. They didn't even care about the existence of other life forms. They simply destroyed anything that stood in their way. And Earth, with its relatively weak defenses, was about to be their next target. When the message was first received, no one believed it. How could anyone think that Earth, a planet so small in the grand scheme of the galaxy, could be in any real danger? The Kryalzar were only a myth, right? A story told by those who had seen their worlds fall to the aliens' might. But then the attacks began. At first, it was small, just a few mysterious disappearances of ships near the outer edges of the solar system. But soon, entire fleets of alien warships began appearing. These ships were massive, their designs unlike anything humanity had ever seen. They were equipped with technology that was centuries, if not millennia, ahead of anything humans had. By the time Earth realized the severity of the threat, it was almost too late. The Kryalzar weren't just after Earth. They were after every planet that had a species capable of resisting them. They were an unstoppable force, consuming everything in their path. In the face of this overwhelming threat, Earth's leaders had no choice but to act. They couldn't sit back and wait for the Kryalzar to arrive. They needed help, and they needed it fast. But who could they turn to? Who would come to their aid in a moment of such desperation? This was when humanity made the most crucial decision of all. They would no longer be passive observers. They would fight. Humans had always been underestimated by the rest of the galaxy. To the alien species, Earth was just a tiny blue dot in a corner of the galaxy, a planet with no real military power, no significant resources, and no true standing among the stars. Yet, humanity had something that no one else did, something the other species had overlooked: the will to survive. And so, Earth began to prepare. But this wasn't just any ordinary preparation. Humanity didn't have the weapons or ships to take on the Kryalzar head-on. No, they had to think differently. They had to create something more powerful, something that could stand against the onslaught of an alien army. And they needed to act quickly. Time was running out. Humanity's first step was to assemble their greatest minds. Scientists, engineers, strategists, all were brought together in a desperate attempt to create the ultimate weapon. The work was intense, the stakes higher than ever before. In the labs and war rooms across Earth, humanity's brightest minds worked around the clock to design a fleet capable of facing the alien menace. But it wasn't just technology that the humans needed. They needed something even more vital: unity. The world had always been divided in so many ways: political differences, cultural clashes, and long-standing grudges between nations. But the Kryles threat united humanity in a way that nothing else ever could. Nations that had once been rivals now worked together, setting aside their differences in favor of a common goal. The best military leaders, tacticians, and warriors from all corners of the world came together to form the backbone of the human defense. They had no choice but to trust one another, for their survival depended on it. As the Kryles fleet drew closer, humanity's own fleet began to take shape. The once small and scattered human ships were now part of a much larger, more organized force. But there was still one major issue. While the humans were working tirelessly to prepare their fleet, they had no idea what they were up against. No one had ever faced the Kryles before. No one knew how they fought or what strategies they used. And so, the humans did the one thing that no one thought they would do. They launched a mission to learn everything they could about their enemy. A small fleet of human ships, equipped with stealth technology and advanced scanning equipment, was sent on a dangerous mission into the heart of the Kryles Empire. It was a suicide mission, one that had no guarantee of success. But the humans had no choice. They needed information, and they needed it now. The mission was a gamble, one that would determine humanity's future. Would the humans be able to learn enough to stand a chance against the Kryles? Or would they fail and doom the galaxy in the process? As the countdown to the final battle ticked closer, the tension on Earth was palpable. Everyone knew that their survival hung in the balance, and in that moment, humanity stood on the brink of something they had never experienced before, a battle for their very existence. The gathering storm. Humanity's resolve strengthens. As the weeks passed, Earth's preparation intensified. The mission to uncover the secrets of the Kryles was risky, but it was the only chance humanity had to truly understand the enemy they were about to face. If they could learn the Kryles' weaknesses, they might stand a fighting chance. Every moment counted, and every second spent waiting felt like an eternity. The small fleet of human ships sent to infiltrate the heart of Kryles territory was cloaked in secrecy. The ships, equipped with cutting-edge stealth technology, moved in silence through the vastness of space. Their mission was clear: observe, learn, and survive. The galaxy's most dangerous predators had no idea that humanity had sent scouts into their midst. On Earth, the remaining population was focused on one thing: survival. The world had already started to feel the strain of preparing for an invasion. Military bases were being established on every continent, factories retooled to produce warships, and scientists worked tirelessly to develop technology that could withstand the Kryles' deadly arsenal. But the true strength of humanity lay not in their technology alone. It was in their sheer determination. Humanity was known for one thing above all: their ability to adapt. They had survived harsh conditions on Earth, they had explored new worlds, and they had overcome impossible odds. Now, with their backs against the wall, they were preparing for the biggest challenge of all. The very existence of their species hung in the balance. As the global military leaders held tense meetings, plans were drawn up for the battle to come. The Kryles fleet was massive and terrifying, but humanity had the element of surprise. The human fleet was still small compared to the Kryles, but the soldiers aboard those ships were unlike any the galaxy had seen before. They were determined to protect their world, their people, and their future. Back on the Kryles side, the alien species had no idea that their plans were being threatened by the humans. To the Kryles, Earth was an insignificant world, a tiny speck among countless other worlds they had conquered over millennia. They had never even considered the possibility that humanity would stand up to them. Their arrogance, however, was about to be their downfall. The small fleet of human scouts reached the heart of the Kryles Empire, and the first pieces of valuable information were sent back to Earth. The humans learned much more than they had anticipated. The Kryles fleet was indeed formidable, but it had one glaring weakness: overconfidence. The Kryles believed their sheer power could crush any opposition, and they rarely bothered to protect their supply lines or smaller vessels. If humanity could exploit this flaw, they might just have a chance at winning the war. At the same time, the human forces began to grow stronger. Every nation on Earth, regardless of past conflicts, had joined forces in the face of a common enemy. Military alliances were formed, resources pooled, and the best and brightest from around the globe were called to action. The Earth's response was a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Their collective resolve grew with each passing day. Though the human fleet remained small in number compared to the Kryles, it was rapidly becoming a force to be reckoned with. Ships were being constructed at an unprecedented rate, with military engineers working around the clock to improve designs. The humans were not only building their fleet, they were evolving their tactics, learning from the Kryles' history of warfare and adapting to it. In hidden underground bunkers, Earth's scientists worked alongside the military to develop weapons that could counter the Kryles' advanced technology. Human ingenuity was their greatest asset, and it was quickly becoming their secret weapon. While the Kryles might have advanced weaponry and ships, humanity had something different: the ability to think outside the box, to innovate, and to fight with a ferocity that the galaxy had never seen before. As the human fleet slowly gathered strength, word spread of their preparations. The galaxy had never seen a force quite like it. A determined, united species, desperate to defend their home. Allies from across the stars began to take notice. Some were reluctant to get involved, unsure whether humanity had the strength to stand against the Kryles, but others, seeing the tenacity of the human forces, began to offer support. Meanwhile, the Kryles, unaware of the changes unfolding on Earth, continued their campaign of destruction. They burned through planets like a wildfire, conquering world after world without mercy. Their warships, equipped with devastating energy weapons, ravaged anything in their path. As they neared Earth, the threat became all too real, and the countdown to war began. Every human on Earth could feel the weight of what was coming. There was no more hiding. There was no more time to wait. The entire species had united with a single purpose: to fight for their survival. The Kryles were coming, and humanity had no choice but to face them head-on. But the humans had one final secret weapon: their own resilience. They would not go down quietly. The galaxy might have underestimated them, but they would soon learn that humanity was not so easily defeated. The countdown to humanity's greatest battle had begun. Would they prevail, or would the Kryles bring an end to their existence? Only time would tell. The battle for Earth begins. Humanity's first strike. The moment the Kryles fleet appeared in the skies above Earth, the air was filled with tension. Every human, from the humblest farmer to the most powerful leaders, could feel it. The Kryles had arrived, and they weren't here to negotiate. The countdown had ended, and the first strike of humanity's fight for survival was about to begin. For the first time in history, Earth's military forces were united as one, no longer divided by borders or political differences. Countries that once fought over trivial matters now stood together, their forces aligned, their ships ready. The human fleet had grown, and the fighters aboard were determined to show the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The Kryles fleet descended from the depths of space with an unstoppable fury. Their massive warships were like dark titans in the sky, each one capable of wiping out entire cities with a single blast. These aliens believed they were invincible, that no species could stand against them. They were wrong. As the first wave of Kryles ships approached Earth's atmosphere, humanity made its move. It wasn't a full-scale engagement yet, but the first signs of resistance were enough to shake the Kryles. From Earth's surface, thousands of fighter jets, advanced warships, and automated drones launched into the air, hurtling toward the alien fleet. The first few moments were chaotic. The skies erupted in a blaze of lights as the human ships clashed with the Kryles. The Kryles weapons, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen, tore into the human fleet with terrifying efficiency. Human ships were torn apart in seconds, and debris rained down onto the Earth below. But the human pilots did not back down. They fought with a ferocity born of desperation and the will to protect their home. Each human fighter knew the stakes. This was not just about survival. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity would never surrender. Humanity's forces had been working on secret technology in the months leading up to the battle. These were their secret weapons: energy shields, plasma missiles, and electromagnetic pulses, all developed by Earth's top scientists, designed to counter the Krylzar's overwhelming technological advantage. Some of these new weapons worked, while others failed, but every single human fighter on the ground and in the sky gave their all. On Earth's surface, military leaders scrambled to coordinate the defense efforts. Cities that had once been thriving metropolises were now the battlefield. Explosions rocked the streets as the Krylzar bombarded human military bases and civilian areas alike. Yet, despite the chaos, humanity was far from beaten. On the ground, human soldiers fought valiantly, using every piece of technology at their disposal to fight back. While the Krylzar used overwhelming firepower, the humans had something far more deadly: ingenuity and tenacity. As the battle raged on, humanity's true power began to shine through. It wasn't in their numbers. It wasn't in their technology. It was in their ability to adapt and fight back, no matter the odds. Human soldiers took cover, planned tactical strikes, and launched guerrilla operations. Some human commanders even managed to exploit the Krylzar's overconfidence, luring them into traps and exploiting their blind spots. Every small victory fueled the human resolve. In space, the battle was even more intense. The Krylzar warships were enormous, dwarfing the human ships, but humanity had a tactical advantage. They knew their home better than the Krylzar ever could. Earth's gravitational pull, its atmosphere, and even the terrain worked in their favor. As the human fleet moved in, they coordinated hit-and-run tactics, striking hard and retreating before the Krylzar could retaliate. Though the alien fleet was superior in firepower, it was still caught off guard by the resilience of the humans. It was during this phase of the battle that humanity's strength truly shone through. The Krylzar, expecting to crush the human resistance with ease, were beginning to experience something unexpected: losses. The Krylzar were realizing that this wasn't going to be an easy conquest. They had underestimated humanity's ability to fight for survival, to adapt, and to defy the odds. The small victories scattered throughout the battle were sending a message to the Krylzar that would be impossible to ignore. On the ground, a new sense of unity began to form among humans. Across the world, soldiers, civilians, and leaders worked together as one. Despite the losses, they held their ground. And the most powerful signal of all came from the human soldiers on the front lines. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for their future. The Krylzar had expected an easy victory. They had expected humans to surrender. What they didn't anticipate was the relentless drive that came with humanity's will to survive. As the first day of battle drew to a close, both sides were battered and broken. But humanity had shown one thing loud and clear: they would never go down without a fight. The Krylzar were just beginning to understand the full extent of what they were up against. The true battle was just beginning. Humanity's counterstrike, turning the tide of battle. As the first day of conflict ended, both sides had suffered devastating losses. The Krylzar, though more advanced in terms of technology, found themselves facing a force unlike any other they had encountered before: humanity's refusal to surrender. What began as a chaotic, one-sided war was now transforming into a brutal standoff. Humanity, though still outnumbered and outgunned, had managed to land several decisive blows. The Krylzar were starting to realize that they might have underestimated their opponents. The Krylzar fleet, once confident in their overwhelming power, now found themselves on the defensive. Their warships, which had once appeared invincible, now had to deal with the relentless tactics and cunning of the human forces. While the alien ships boasted powerful weaponry, humanity's secret advantage lay in their adaptability. The second day of the conflict saw humanity's resolve harden. The human fleet, though still smaller than the Krylzar's, had begun to fight with more purpose, more coordination. Pilots who had barely made it through the first few hours of battle were now seasoned veterans. They knew their enemies, and they knew how to strike when a Krylzar let their guard down. The Krylzar's complacency was their greatest weakness, and humanity was quick to exploit it. On the surface of Earth, the humans were fighting just as fiercely. Cities once filled with millions of civilians now resembled war zones. The Krylzar had ravaged entire regions, but humanity's resilience was impossible to overlook. Civilians and soldiers alike had taken to the streets to defend their homes, using whatever weapons they could find. Earth's landscapes, from dense jungles to urban sprawls, offered a myriad of ways to fight back against the Krylzar. Humans knew their environment better than anyone, and they used that knowledge to wage guerrilla warfare against the seemingly invincible invaders. One of the greatest triumphs of the second day came when a group of human engineers managed to successfully activate an experimental weapon that had been in the works for months, a massive energy pulse cannon. It wasn't perfect, and it had never been tested in combat, but in that moment, it was humanity's last hope. They aimed the cannon at one of the Krylzar's capital warships and fired. The result was catastrophic. The Krylzar warship shuddered as the beam struck it, igniting the ship's engines and sending it into a fiery spiral. The explosion was massive, and the shockwave rippled through the skies. The Krylzar were forced to retreat, leaving behind a trail of wreckage in their wake. Though the battle was far from over, this victory was symbolic. It showed that humanity could and would strike back. The alien invaders were not as invulnerable as they had thought. On the ground, the human resistance was beginning to take shape. More and more civilians were joining the fight, and military forces had found new ways to coordinate. Humans who had once feared their invaders were now taking charge, organizing resistance groups, and leading strikes against Krylzar positions. Every small victory, whether it was retaking the city block or repelling a Krylzar assault, was a testament to humanity's relentless spirit. Meanwhile, the Krylzar were beginning to question their strategy. They had expected a quick, crushing victory. Instead, they found themselves entangled in a conflict unlike any they had experienced before. The humans, with their seemingly endless adaptability and determination, were turning the tide of battle. What was supposed to be an easy conquest was rapidly becoming a war of attrition. Despite their technological superiority, the Krylzar were losing their morale. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and they were beginning to realize that they might have bitten off more than they could chew. Each Krylzar defeat sent a message across the galaxy. The humans were not as weak as the Krylzar had thought. As the days wore on, the Krylzar fleet found itself increasingly on the defensive. The humans were using every tool at their disposal: ambushes, traps, and hit-and-run tactics. They had taken the Krylzar's initial overconfidence and turned it into their greatest advantage. The Krylzar might have had the numbers, but humanity had something more powerful: the ability to adapt, to learn, and to fight for their home. Despite their heavy losses, humanity was beginning to understand one crucial fact: victory was possible. The tide of battle was turning, and every day that passed brought humanity closer to reclaiming their planet from the invaders. The Krylzar had thought they were the superior species. They had thought they could defeat humanity with ease. But as they found out the hard way, humanity was not a species that could be easily conquered. The battle was far from over, but humanity had proven one thing: they would not go down without a fight. Humanity's unyielding resistance. The Krylzar underestimate the fight. As the third day of the war dawned, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The humans had just launched a daring counteroffensive, and reports came in from all over the world, showing signs of their fierce resistance. The Krylzar, once so sure of their victory, were now facing the human force that fought not just with their weapons, but with their hearts and minds. The once proud invaders were now realizing that their conquest might not be as easy as they had hoped. In orbit, the human fleet continued to reorganize, pushing back the Krylzar forces that had been trying to maintain their hold on Earth's orbit. the human commanders had quickly understood the importance of strategy. Their small but highly maneuverable fleet had begun to exploit the Krylzar's clumsy tactics. While the Krylzar relied on their overwhelming firepower, the humans had learned how to use speed and intelligence as their primary weapons. Each engagement was a carefully orchestrated strike aimed at finding the weak points in the enemy's defenses. One of humanity's most remarkable strengths had always been their ability to innovate under pressure. Military engineers, who had once focused on research and development for peaceful purposes, now found themselves at the heart of the war effort. In bunkers and laboratories, they worked tirelessly to create new weapons, technology, and strategies to level the playing field. It wasn't just about winning. They were fighting for the survival of their species. One such breakthrough came when a group of human engineers developed an experimental cloaking device. The device had never been fully tested, but there was no time for hesitation. They had to act. The first test run of the cloaking technology was nothing short of revolutionary. Suddenly, entire squadrons of human ships could appear out of nowhere, striking with deadly precision and disappearing before the Krylzar could retaliate. The alien invaders were forced to rethink their tactics, as they could no longer rely on their advanced tracking systems to pinpoint humanity's movements. On the ground, humanity's resistance had only grown more organized. Small groups of fighters, once isolated, now coordinated their attacks with military precision. As cities fell, resistance fighters took to the shadows, setting traps, sabotaging alien supply lines, and attacking Krylzar strongholds. It wasn't just the military fighting anymore. Civilians, farmers, and teachers were now part of the effort. Humanity had come together as one to protect their home, and they were showing no signs of slowing down. In one of the largest cities, a guerrilla resistance group successfully infiltrated a Krylzar communication hub. The mission was dangerous, and the casualties were high, but it sent a powerful message. Humanity was fighting back with everything they had. The group was able to disrupt the Krylzar's communication network for several hours, crippling their ability to coordinate a response. During that brief window, the human fleet launched a brutal, coordinated strike on several Krylzar ships that had been laying siege to Earth's orbital defense platforms. The battle in space raged on, with each new human victory sending shockwaves through the Krylzar ranks. Their morale was sinking, and despite their advanced technology, they began to falter. The Krylzar's superior numbers no longer seemed to guarantee them victory. For the first time, the invaders were questioning their strategy, wondering how a species so primitive was able to challenge them in such a decisive way. But there was one thing the Krylzar had failed to account for: humanity's relentless determination. In the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, the humans had begun to gain ground. The Krylzar fleet, once imposing and mighty, now found itself stretched thin, constantly fighting off skirmishes and counterattacks. With each passing hour, humanity's momentum grew. They knew their world was at stake, and they would not let it fall without a fight. The world's leaders, military commanders, and even the civilians on the front lines had all made the same vow: Earth would not be conquered. In space and on the ground, the battle for Earth had become a symbol. It was no longer just about the fight for survival. It was a fight for the future. The message was clear to the Krylzar: humanity would never surrender. And that alone made them a force that the invaders had underestimated at their peril. The turning point. Humanity strikes back. As the war raged on, Earth's skies were no longer the dark, quiet place they had once been. The Krylzar, once the invincible conquerors of countless worlds, were now faced with the wrath of a planet they had underestimated. Humanity's resilience, ingenuity, and sheer will to survive had turned the tide of battle in a way that no one had expected. On the ground, human forces were beginning to show the Krylzar that they had not only the capacity for survival, but also the ability to adapt and overcome. Guerrilla tactics, previously dismissed by the invaders as primitive and ineffective, had become one of the most formidable weapons in humanity's arsenal. Every city, Every small town and every village had become a stronghold. The invaders quickly realized that they were no longer fighting an uncoordinated resistance. They were fighting a united human front. In the heart of the resistance's leadership, a council of commanders had formed to strategize the next big move. Among them was General Claire Harrington, a seasoned military leader who had once led peacekeeping forces around the world. Now she was at the forefront of humanity's war against the Krylzar. Her calm demeanor and sharp mind had earned her the trust of the people, and under her leadership, the human forces had begun to plan for a decisive strike that would cripple the Krylzar's ability to wage war. The key to their plan lay in the Krylzar's supply lines. Without a steady stream of resources and reinforcements, their forces would falter. The human resistance had successfully infiltrated several alien outposts, sabotaging the Krylzar's logistics and damaging their fleets. But the big break came when the resistance managed to locate the Krylzar's central command station in the asteroid belt, a heavily fortified structure that was essential for coordinating the invaders' operations. General Harrington knew that this was the moment. They had to strike fast and decisively, before the Krylzar could mount a counteroffensive. The Resistance's fleet, now equipped with the new cloaking technology, would lead the charge. If they could take out the Krylzar's command center, it would create chaos in the enemy ranks, throwing their entire strategy into disarray. At dawn, the human fleet surged forward, cloaked and undetectable, slipping past the Krylzar's defenses. The tension was palpable as the resistance fighters prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. They knew the risks. The Krylzar's defenses were formidable, and failure could mean the end for many of them. But the hope that they could change the tide of the war drove them forward. The Krylzar, confident in their overwhelming superiority, had not anticipated such a swift and daring strike. As the cloaked human ships neared their target, they unleashed a torrent of devastating firepower. The Krylzar's command station, a massive fortress surrounded by a fleet of heavily armed ships, was hit by a barrage of missiles and energy weapons. The explosion was cataclysmic. The Krylzar's command center was torn apart, and in the chaos that followed, their fleet was thrown into disarray. On the ground, the Krylzar forces faltered as their command structure collapsed. The human resistance, coordinated and relentless, took advantage of the confusion. Cities that had been under siege for weeks were finally liberated. The tide of war had officially turned. The Krylzar were not used to being the ones on the defensive. They had conquered countless worlds with ease, but humanity had shown them that Earth was not a world to be conquered. The human spirit, fierce, resilient, and unyielding, was a force the Krylzar had never encountered before. But even as humanity celebrated its victory in space and on Earth's surface, the war was far from over. The Krylzar were a formidable enemy, and they would not simply retreat. The battle for Earth had reached a new phase, one that would test humanity's resolve like never before. General Harrington stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring out at the stars. The Krylzar might have been thrown into chaos, but humanity was not safe yet. They had taken a critical step toward victory, but the war was far from over. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, and more hardships to endure. But as she looked at the faces of the soldiers around her, she knew one thing: humanity would fight until the very end, and the Krylzar would never be able to take away what humanity had worked so hard to protect. The last stand, humanity's final victory. The Krylzar had regrouped, their fleet broken but not entirely defeated. They were now more determined than ever to crush the resistance and ensure their dominion over Earth. The human victory at the command station had shaken them, but they were a brutal, relentless species. The humans knew that the hardest battle was yet to come. In the aftermath of the assault on the Krylzar command center, the world had rallied. Every nation on Earth, once fractured by its own conflicts, now stood united under a common banner. No longer was the war just about survival. It had become a war for humanity's future, a war to ensure that Earth's legacy would not be one of extinction, but of perseverance. General Claire Harrington, Once the steady and calm leader, now felt the weight of her responsibility. The war was far from over, and the Krylzar were planning their final assault. The next battle would determine everything. She stood at the command center, looking at the map that projected the Krylzar's fleet movements across the galaxy. The enemy was heading for Earth, their strongest forces amassed in one final push. "We have one shot," Harrington said, her voice steady, though the pressure was immense. "If we fail, we lose Earth. The entire human race will be wiped out." Her voice echoed through the quiet room. The human resistance forces had managed to scrape together every last ounce of strength, every fighter and every weapon, for this final stand. The Earth's population had built underground bunkers, fortified cities, and constructed the most advanced defenses humanity had ever known. But they all knew that they were fighting a superior foe, one with technology far beyond their own. What the Krylzar had in strength and weaponry, humanity had to make up for in resourcefulness and sheer will. With the Krylzar fleet closing in, the human forces prepared for the ultimate battle. The stakes were higher than ever before. The humans had no intention of surrendering. The time had come for them to show the Krylzar what true desperation and resilience looked like. The battle began with a roar of engines and the shudder of weapons fire. The Krylzar ships, massive and intimidating, loomed on the horizon as the human fleet moved in to intercept them. The ships were cloaked in a stealth technology the Krylzar had never encountered before, and they were about to be blindsided. The human fleet struck with ferocity, exploiting every weakness, every opening that had been found in the previous battles. Humanity had learned quickly, and their tactics were becoming increasingly effective. In the heart of the battle, General Harrington stood at the front lines, leading the charge alongside her fleet. Her flagship, the Defiant, cut through space like a sharp blade, cutting down one Krylzar ship after another. The battle was brutal, and the Krylzar were relentless, but humanity's strategy was proving effective. On the surface of Earth, the Resistance had launched a series of offensives to push back the remaining Krylzar ground forces. Humans, inspired by the success in space, fought with everything they had. There was no room for fear. There was only room for victory. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of combat as humans pushed forward, recapturing cities and weakening the alien invaders. The Krylzar, faced with unexpected resistance and mounting losses, started to crumble. Their communication systems were jammed. Their fleet was scattered, and their ground forces were losing morale. Humanity had become a force to be reckoned with, and the Krylzar had no choice but to retreat. But the final blow came when the Defiant led a charge straight into the heart of the Krylzar flagship. With a final, devastating assault, they'd breached the ship's defenses and detonated its core, sending a massive shockwave throughout the battlefront. The Krylzar fleet, their command structure shattered, had no choice but to retreat from the battlefield, leaving Earth to the victorious humans. The war was over. Earth had been saved. As the remaining Krylzar forces limped away, beaten and broken, the humans stood victorious. The cost had been high. Lives had been lost. Cities had been destroyed. And the planet had been ravaged by war. But humanity had proven that no force in the galaxy, no matter how advanced, could overcome the unyielding strength and spirit of the human race. General Harrington stood amidst the wreckage of the final battle, her face tired but resolute. She knew that the scars of the war would never fully heal, but Earth had survived. And in that moment, humanity stood united, not just as survivors, but as conquerors in their own right. The galaxy had learned a powerful lesson. When humans decided to fight back, there was no force that could stop them. And so, as the stars above burned brightly in the vastness of space, humanity's place in the universe was forever changed. They had faced extinction, and they had emerged victorious. For the first time, the Krylzar knew true fear, and the universe would never forget what humanity had done.